Well, boys, you better write this down. For the first time in history, I may have run into a little bit of good luck. I'm about to measure piston to valve clearance, but I wanted to get an idea for just how tight it may be. And I believe I've run into some good luck here. I put a straight edge over the deck, and I just measured the distance between this valve margin here, the tightest point, and I compared it to the old head, and I actually have more clearance. It looks like I'm gaining about 50 thousandths on the intake and about 75 thousandths on the exhaust, which is great because I was not looking forward to destroying my pistons potentially with those in-head fly cutters. But so that's a good thing. The other thing while I'm here, let's talk about push rods. So back when I built my first engine, a little small block Chevy 350, every penny counted. And there are some things I felt like I can and should save money on. So this is a push rod out of a small block Chevy 350, old iron, all thread, 2 nuts. That piece of tape is there just for friction to keep the nuts from moving around. The actual push rod you will have to cut out an inch or so to give you adjustment on here. Of course, that's hardened steel. You're not going to do it with a hacksaw. You're going to need a real cutoff wheel. Point being, this is a place to save some money if you so choose. Hindsight, though, man, probably not the best place to do that, but it is an option. So I do have the comp ones over here. Now, one of these is the standard length, the short one. You can see 6.8 to 7.8 inches. And then this one, which I'm going to need for these new heads, is 7.8 to 8.8. So, and these are nice, right? They have a little adjustment line on there. I don't know how well you can see these dots. But every time you turn it and you line it up, this is not going well. Every time you turn it and you line up that perforated line, that's 50 thousandths. So you can do the math really easy. And I would recommend it because on this guy, you're going to have to assemble that, get it right, and then you're going to have to measure with calipers, and there's more room for error. So, you know, you can do it, but I would recommend a push rod length checker. In this case, this is going to come in handy because now I can use both of those, my homemade one and the longer one, to set up the piston to valve clearance. I won't have to disassemble stuff just to move the longer one over. All right, so now to get ready for the piston to valve clearance checking with clay, I'm going to swap out the existing lifters. So, by the way, the ones I use are the GM Cadillac racing lifters. They are a GM lifter rated up to 8,500 RPMs, so you know it's a quality lifter. But otherwise, it's the same overall dimensions as the regular LS7 lifter. But I will be using for this, these are the original lifters that came out of the car, and I made them solid. You can take them apart. I'm not going to go into it. There's other videos. But you pop out the little retaining clip, and you can take the guts out. This thing will focus. Pop that clip off, take the guts out, flip them upside down, reassemble, and then you lose all hydraulic action. It makes it solid. So that's what I'll be using to make sure that we're all good. And, you know, I'll throw in my 2 cents. So there's always the question, which side do you put that hole on? Does it even matter? So, you know, these lifters, they work off of pressure. They do not work off of flow. So as long as it has access to that oil galley, you're going to be fine. It's not, in my opinion, it does not matter. However, that being said, there's still a little bit of flow that occurs. So I always face these towards the back of the block, which is the direction for which the oil comes from. Does it make a difference? I doubt it. It gives me peace of mind. I think GM throws them all random anyway. So I'm going to get these LS7 lifters in and get it mocked up, and then we're going to do some clay squishing. All right, we got the piston cleaned off, and I got my engine building supplies from Walmart, that little modeling clay. All right, we'll mock up the engine, put the head on, measure push rods for 0 lash, and then we'll take an impression. All right, so I have the piston cylinder head mocked up. I have clay in the cylinder. We got my intake and exhaust rockers. The push rods have been set up for zero valve lash. You know, I have solid lifters right in here, the temporary ones. So I can't have any lash. If you go longer, it will hang the valve open when it's supposed to be closed. So when you do the clay test, then that would essentially make the piston to valve clearance even tighter or worse. So we're going to go for zero lash, get hopefully an accurate representation here. The other thing is I want the clay to stick to the piston, not the valve. I forgot to swipe a little bit of oil on the valve face, so but it's pretty dry clay, so I don't think we'll have any problems. All right, I got my son over here to help out, so he's going to turn the engine over. All right, Gunner, go for it. We'll watch these valves. There you go. Careful with that electrical connector, don't break that. Keep going, you're doing good, man. Waiting on those valves to open. All right, there goes the exhaust. Keep going, man. You're doing good. All right, good job. Keep going. There goes the intake. Oh, I may not have had it on the base. Well, as luck would have it, I dropped my 10 mil socket into the nether regions of the old engine bay. And when the old magnet on a stick ain't long enough to get what you're after, got to bust out a move from your prom night. Use your fingers and explore around in the engine bay. I would highly recommend dropping a rare earth magnet inside your nitrile glove and then just poke around until you get what you're after. Works like a charm. Hopefully that'll save you some struggles someday. All right, well, I just pulled the head off. This is what we're left with. It looks like we have gobs of clearance on the exhaust side, but I'm still going to cut it open and we're going to take a look. All right, so after some careful trimming, this is the intake side. Looks a little bit tighter than I was anticipating, but we're still going to measure. All right, so I'm about on my third or fourth time doing this. I just want to make sure that I'm doing it right, going slow, taking my time. This is the time to sweat the details. I can barely afford to do one top-end refresh, let alone doing an entire engine rebuild later. So go slow, sweat the details, get it right. This is your only chance to do this. So I am doing this without the head gasket. So it looks like the intake is still pretty close. I measured it a couple times. I'm between 50 and 75 thousandths, best I can tell with the clay. Head gasket's going to add another 40, so I should be good. The exhaust valve has got plenty of clearance, as you can tell. Barely kissed that last one. But the important part is you want to make sure that you're getting it right here in the middle where the valve face is. You know, you don't want to be off to the side. You want to be the most pessimistic viewpoint that you can be. So I'm going to measure these, and if no surprises, I'm going to call it good and start the rebuild. All right, so the results are in. I'm totally fine, and honestly, I am thrilled that I do not have to fly cut the pistons. I was really not looking forward to doing that. Yeah, I spent lots of money on some cool tools and stuff that I didn't get to use. However, I think there's a huge risk of me permanently destroying those pistons and then having to go to the wife for more funding for a new engine. So it's a good thing, right? I'm not too disappointed. I lucked out. So with the head gasket, I do have plenty of room, 85 thousandths on the intake and gobs of clearance, 178 on the exhaust side. So then the question is, well, how much clearance do you actually need? Depending on who you ask, you're going to get values all over the place, especially if you just start Googling random articles. You know, a lot of the stuff that I saw on my Google searches really kind of pertains to the old school small block Chevys with iron blocks, iron heads, and their geometries and, just the materials of the time. The LS engines, you can run much tighter. My local machine shop said 45 thousandths on the intake, and his justification was if you make contact at 45 thousandths, it's due to some other reason. There's some other catastrophic failure that happened, and it's not the fault of that tight clearance. And going to a larger clearance isn't going to prevent that other initial catastrophic failure. So he says 45 thousandths on intake and 80 on exhaust. Steve Morris, he builds high-end engines. Maybe controversial to some. I'm not saying that he's the end-all be-all guru, but just another data point. I always like to collect for anything as many different data points as I can and triangulate my own theory or idea of reality. So he's pretty in line with my local machine shop for the suggestions. Now, the hard part is it's not always a straightforward answer. There are a lot of factors. And when you're doing some static checking on a static engine, well, that's not really how an engine operates. It's hot. It's, there's parts move, they stretch when you don't want them to or expect them to, and you can't really predict those type of things. So there's a few factors right in there that I've listed. But really, that article by GPI, that Guatney Performance Innovations, they have an excellent article. I highly recommend that you read that. And it kind of covers this stuff, along with lifter preload and its relationship to piston to valve clearance. It's one of the best tech articles that I've read on the subject. So do check that out. I'm not going to try to rehash that, but definitely read it. Anyway, appreciate you watching. I'll throw some more videos together once these heads are on and maybe tackle some tuning and some of the power results. But I'm not going to bore you guys with the blow by blow of tightening each single bolt and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, see you soon. Later.